The doctors stopped speaking before they even left the room. Their silence said everything words could not. 12-year-old Ethan Caldwell, the only son of billionaire Richard Caldwell, lay motionless beneath glowing hospital lights while machines measured the life slowly slipping away. The world's greatest specialists had arrived from every corner of the globe. They tested, scanned, argued, and exhausted every possibility. Finally, the lead physician lowered his eyes and whispered, "We've done everything we can." In that instant, a father with unlimited wealth discovered the one thing money could never buy. Hope disappeared from the room like the final breath before a storm. Outside the hospital, television crews waited day and night, broadcasting updates about the boy everyone believed would inherit one of the largest fortunes in the country. Social media overflowed with prayers, theories, and heartbreaking messages. Richard ignored every camera. His tailored suits had become wrinkled from sleepless nights, and the confident businessman who controlled billion-dollar companies now looked like a man drowning in helplessness. Every hour he remained beside Ethan's bed, staring at his son's pale face, silently begging for a miracle that never came. On the opposite side of the city, 15-year-old Noah wandered through crowded streets carrying everything he owned inside a faded backpack. He had no family, no permanent shelter, and no one waiting for him at the end of the day. Every morning was a battle for food, every night a search for safety. Yet despite his hardships, strangers often noticed something unusual about him. Injured birds calmed in his hands. Frightened animals trusted him instantly. Even people overwhelmed by pain somehow found comfort after speaking with him, though Noah never understood why. One rainy afternoon, Noah passed the hospital while searching for a dry place to rest. He noticed hundreds of flowers covering the entrance, candles flickering beneath photographs of Ethan, and reporters speaking into cameras with solemn expressions. Curious, he asked a security guard what had happened. The guard sighed heavily and explained that the billionaire's son was dying, and even the greatest doctors had surrendered. Noah stood quietly, staring toward the towering glass building as an uneasy feeling settled deep inside him. At that exact moment, Ethan's heart monitor suddenly produced a strange rhythm that none of the specialists had seen before. Doctors rushed back into the room, checking monitors, replacing equipment, and reviewing medications. Nothing explained the mysterious change. Ethan's heartbeat weakened, then stabilized for a brief second before fading again. Confusion spread through the intensive care unit. Richard watched every movement with desperate eyes, refusing to leave even as nurses begged him to rest. Somewhere inside, he felt his son was still fighting. Outside, Noah could not shake the strange sensation pulling him toward the hospital doors. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It felt like an invisible thread tightening around his chest with every passing second. He tried walking away twice, but each time his feet stopped on their own. He looked back at the building, confused by emotions he couldn't explain. As thunder rolled across the darkening sky, Noah finally stepped toward the entrance. Security guards immediately blocked his path, assuming he wanted shelter from the rain. Before they could send him away, an elderly janitor quietly watched the exchange from across the lobby. His expression changed the moment he looked into Noah's eyes, as though recognizing something no one else could see. Slowly, the old man walked forward, raised a trembling hand, and spoke 6 words that would change every life inside the hospital forever. "Let the boy see Ethan. Just once." The lobby fell silent after the janitor spoke. Security guards exchanged confused glances before one of them laughed under his breath. "You can't be serious," he muttered. "The entire floor is locked down." But the elderly man never looked away from Noah. Decades of cleaning hospital corridors had taught him to recognize fear, grief, and desperation. What he saw in the homeless boy was something entirely different. It was calm, steady, almost impossible to explain. Noah shifted uneasily beneath their stares. "I don't even know him," he admitted quietly. "I just feel like I'm supposed to be here." Upstairs, alarms suddenly echoed through Ethan's room. Nurses rushed toward the bed while another doctor ordered additional medication. Richard's heart pounded as he watched specialists move with frantic urgency. They had promised to keep his son comfortable during his final hours, yet now they looked more confused than ever. Ethan's oxygen levels dropped without warning before climbing again for only a few seconds. Every machine seemed to disagree with the others. No medical explanation made sense. The lead physician finally turned toward Richard with exhausted eyes. "We're witnessing something unusual," she admitted. "But we still don't know how long he has." Those words crushed whatever fragile hope remained. Richard leaned over his unconscious son and whispered, "Please don't leave me. I would trade everything I own just to hear your voice one more time." Downstairs, the janitor made an unexpected decision. Ignoring the protests of security, he handed Noah a visitor badge. "Come with me," he said softly. "If I'm wrong, I'll accept the consequences." They entered a service elevator rarely used by visitors. As the doors closed, Noah felt his heartbeat quicken. He had never stepped inside a place so elegant. Polished walls reflected his worn clothes and soaked shoes. He suddenly wondered if he should turn back. The janitor noticed his hesitation. "Sometimes," he whispered, "people arrive exactly when they're needed." Noah looked at him, confused. "Have we met before?" The old man smiled sadly. "No. But years ago, someone unexpected saved my daughter when doctors had already given up. Since then, I've learned never to dismiss impossible things." The elevator climbed higher. Halfway to the intensive care floor, every light inside the elevator flickered at once. For 3 long seconds, complete darkness surrounded them. When the emergency lights returned, Noah was breathing heavily. Strange images had flashed through his mind, images that did not belong to his own memories. He saw a young boy standing beside a lake, laughing as he skipped stones across the water. He saw the same boy crying beside a lonely tree. Then he heard a voice whisper only one sentence. "He isn't ready to leave." The doors opened. The hallway outside the intensive care unit was crowded with bodyguards, hospital executives, and anxious relatives. Television updates played silently on mounted screens. Everyone turned toward Noah the moment they saw his torn jacket and weathered backpack. Whispers spread instantly. "Who let him up here? This area is restricted. Get security." Before anyone could stop him, Richard stepped out of Ethan's room after hearing the commotion. His face carried the exhaustion of countless sleepless nights. He looked at Noah for only a second before asking sharply, "Who is this?" Nobody answered. The janitor stepped forward. "Sir," he said respectfully, "I know how this looks, but something told me this boy needed to come." Richard stared at Noah with disbelief. Anger flared inside him. "My son is dying," he snapped. "This isn't the time for strange stories." Noah lowered his head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted to cause trouble." He turned to leave. Then, from inside Ethan's room, every monitor began sounding at the exact same moment. Doctors shouted. Nurses ran. And before anyone could react, Ethan's lifeless hand slowly lifted from the bed, as if reaching for someone standing just outside the door. Every sound in the intensive care unit seemed to stop at once. Doctors froze where they stood. Nurses stared in disbelief. Richard Caldwell's breath caught in his throat as Ethan's hand remained suspended above the bed, trembling as though pulled by an invisible force. For weeks, the boy had shown almost no voluntary movement. Every specialist had agreed the damage to his body was irreversible. Yet now, against every prediction, his fingers stretched toward the doorway. Toward Noah. "Did anyone touch him?" the lead physician demanded. Every nurse shook their head. No. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm, stronger than it had been all day. Blood pressure rose slightly. Oxygen levels climbed by 2 points. Small changes, but enough to leave experienced doctors speechless. They rushed to verify every monitor, convinced a machine had malfunctioned. Each result confirmed the impossible. Richard slowly turned toward Noah. The homeless boy stood motionless, fear written across his face. He hadn't taken another step. He looked ready to run. "I swear," Noah whispered, I didn't do anything. Richard searched the boy's eyes, trying to understand why his son's hand had reached toward a complete stranger. Nothing about Noah made sense. His clothes were worn. His shoes barely held together. His backpack looked as though it carried his entire life. Yet Ethan had responded to him in a way no medicine ever had. The lead physician hesitated. Then she made a decision few doctors would ever consider. Bring him inside. Several staff members objected immediately. This violates protocol. We don't know who he is. It's too risky. The physician silenced them with a raised hand. We've already exhausted every approved treatment. 5 minutes won't change that. Richard nodded slowly. Noah entered the room with uncertain steps. The closer he came to Ethan's bed, the heavier the air seemed to become. Goosebumps covered his arms despite the warm temperature. An unfamiliar sadness settled inside his chest, as though he could somehow feel the pain surrounding the unconscious boy. He stopped beside the bed. Without thinking, Noah reached out. His fingers hovered inches above Ethan's hand. The instant they touched, every monitor in the room emitted a single sharp tone. Then the screens filled with readings no one expected. Heart rate stabilized. Blood pressure improved. Brain activity increased. For several stunned seconds, nobody moved. The impossible was happening. The lead physician quickly checked every cable again, refusing to believe what she was seeing. Another doctor repeated the neurological scan. The numbers remained unchanged. Richard couldn't take his eyes off his son. Tears slowly filled them. For the first time in weeks, hope returned. But Noah suddenly staggered backward. His face turned pale. A violent headache struck without warning. He squeezed his eyes shut as another flood of unfamiliar images exploded inside his mind. This time they were clearer. He saw Ethan trapped inside endless darkness. He heard the frightened boy calling for his father. He saw a small wooden music box spinning alone on a bedroom shelf. Then another image appeared. A woman smiled warmly while placing that music box into Ethan's tiny hands years earlier. Before disappearing, she whispered something. "Tell your father." The vision shattered. Noah gasped for air and nearly collapsed. Richard caught him before he hit the floor. "What did you see?" Richard asked urgently. Noah opened his eyes slowly. I don't understand. Please." The room waited. Noah swallowed hard. "I saw a woman." Richard's expression changed instantly. "What woman?" "I think she was Ethan's mother." Silence crushed the room. Ethan's mother had died 6 years earlier. No photographs of her had appeared anywhere inside the hospital. Noah could never have known what she looked like. Richard's hands began shaking. "What did she say?" Noah closed his eyes, trying desperately to remember every word. "She said." Before he could finish the sentence, Ethan's eyes suddenly opened. Not halfway. Not briefly. Completely. He stared directly at Noah. Then, with a weak smile that no one believed they would ever see again, he whispered 3 chilling words. "I remember you. I remember you." The words were barely louder than a breath, yet they struck the room with the force of an explosion. Every doctor froze. Nurses stood motionless, afraid even to blink. Richard Caldwell stared at his son as tears streamed down his face. For weeks, Ethan had remained completely unresponsive. The specialists had warned that even if he somehow survived, he might never speak again. Yet now, against every prediction, he had opened his eyes and uttered 3 unmistakable words. No one understood them. Richard leaned closer, his voice trembling. "Ethan, it's Dad. Can you hear me?" Ethan looked at him, but only for a moment. His gaze drifted back to Noah. "You came," Ethan whispered. Noah's heart pounded. "I've never met you before." Ethan frowned weakly, as though searching through distant memories. "Not here," he murmured. before. The room fell silent again. The doctors immediately began checking Ethan's pupils, reflexes, and vital signs. Every reading continued to improve. His heartbeat grew steadier. Oxygen levels climbed higher than they had in weeks. The lead physician struggled to remain professional, but even she could not hide her astonishment. "This recovery," she said quietly. "There's no medical explanation for it." Richard barely heard her. He was too focused on his son. "Ethan," he asked gently, "what do you mean you remember Noah?" Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. "I was lost," he whispered. "Everything was dark. I couldn't find you. Then someone kept telling me not to be afraid." His breathing remained calm. Richard squeezed his hand. "Who?" Ethan slowly pointed toward Noah. "Him." Noah stepped back in confusion. "I don't understand," he said. "I wasn't there." "But you were," Ethan replied softly. A chill swept across the room. Even the nurses exchanged uneasy glances. The lead physician tried to redirect the conversation. "Hallucinations are possible after prolonged unconsciousness," she explained. "His brain is recovering. Memories and dreams may blend together." Richard wanted to believe that explanation. Yet something deep inside him resisted it. He remembered Noah describing Ethan's mother, a woman the boy could never have seen. He remembered the impossible change in Ethan's condition the instant Noah touched his hand. Too many impossible things had happened within a single hour. Then Noah suddenly looked toward the corner of the room. His expression changed. "There's something here," he whispered. Everyone followed his gaze. Nothing. Only an empty chair beside the window. Noah slowly walked toward it. His breathing became shallow. He stopped inches away. She was sitting here. Richard's face turned pale. "That chair." His voice broke. "That was my wife's favorite place to sit whenever Ethan was sick." No one else knew that. Not even the hospital staff. Only Richard. The room became unbearably still. Noah closed his eyes again. The strange pressure inside his head returned. This time, however, the vision was stronger than ever. He saw Ethan's mother smiling. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked peaceful. She pointed toward a large grandfather clock inside the Caldwell mansion. Behind it was a narrow compartment hidden within the wall. Then she spoke clearly. "Tell Richard the letter is still there." The vision vanished instantly. Noah staggered backward. Richard caught him again. "What letter?" he demanded. "I don't know," Noah answered honestly. "She only said it was behind the clock." Richard's breathing became uneven. Years earlier, after his wife's death, he had sealed off an old sitting room inside the mansion because he could not bear to enter it again. The grandfather clock was still there. No one had touched it since. He had never told another living person about the hidden compartment behind it. Not even Ethan. A stunned silence settled over the room. Richard looked at Noah. Then at his recovering son. Finally, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He turned to his security chief. "Prepare the car." The chief blinked in confusion. "Sir, your son still needs constant monitoring." Richard nodded. "He's coming too." The doctors immediately protested. "It's dangerous. He isn't stable enough. You can't leave now." But before anyone could stop him, Ethan opened his eyes once more and smiled faintly. "We have to go," he whispered. "She's been waiting." Richard felt his entire world shift. If the hidden compartment truly contained a letter no one else knew existed, then everything he believed about that impossible day was about to change forever. Richard Caldwell had spent his entire life trusting facts, contracts, and evidence. As one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country, he never made decisions based on emotion alone. Yet that afternoon, standing beside the hospital bed where his son had been expected to die only hours earlier, he chose to follow something no balance sheet or medical report could explain. An ambulance transported Ethan under constant medical supervision while Richard, Noah, and several security vehicles raced toward the Caldwell estate. News helicopters followed overhead, believing the billionaire was moving his recovering son to a private facility. No reporter imagined the truth. When the gates opened, Richard stepped onto the property with a mixture of hope and fear. The mansion looked exactly as it had the day his wife, Emily, died 6 years earlier. He led everyone through silent hallways until they reached the old sitting room. Dust covered every surface. Nothing had been disturbed. Against the far wall stood the towering grandfather clock. Richard stared at it without speaking. "I haven't entered this room since the funeral," he admitted quietly. Noah walked closer. "The letter is behind it." Security officers carefully pulled the enormous clock away from the wall. At first, they found nothing except old wood panels. Then one of them noticed a tiny brass latch hidden beneath years of dust. He pressed it. A narrow compartment slowly opened. Inside rested a small wooden box. Richard's hands trembled as he lifted it out. The box contained a sealed envelope with only 3 handwritten words. "For Richard, later." He recognized Emily's handwriting instantly. Tears blurred his vision. With shaking fingers, he opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written months before her death. "My dearest Richard, if you are reading this, then life has carried you to a moment when logic alone could no longer guide your heart. I know how you see the world. You believe every problem has a solution if you work hard enough. But there will come a day when love asks you to trust what cannot be measured. If Ethan ever loses his way, someone unexpected will help him find it again. Do not judge that person by appearance, wealth, or status. Welcome them as family, because kindness will return to us through someone who owns almost nothing. When that day comes, choose compassion over fear. And promise me one more thing. Give another child the future our son was blessed to have." Richard could no longer hold back his tears. He looked toward Noah. The homeless boy stood silently near the doorway, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. At that exact moment, Ethan slowly climbed from his wheelchair and walked, completely unassisted, across the room. Doctors gasped. Only hours earlier, they had doubted he would survive the night. Now he wrapped his arms around Noah. "Thank you," Ethan whispered. Noah hugged him back, still unable to explain any of it. The lead physician lowered her head. "In 30 years of medicine," she said softly, "I have never witnessed anything like this." Weeks passed. Ethan continued recovering until every medical test confirmed he was completely healthy. Experts published papers, debated theories, and searched endlessly for scientific explanations. None satisfied them. Richard kept the letter framed in his private office as a reminder that miracles sometimes arrive wearing torn clothes instead of expensive suits. He legally adopted Noah, giving him not only a home but the family he had never known. Years later, when reporters asked Ethan what had truly saved his life, he always smiled before answering. It wasn't money. It wasn't medicine. It was someone the world had already forgotten. And every time Noah heard those words, he remembered the rainy afternoon when he almost walked away from the hospital. Had he ignored the strange feeling pulling him toward those doors, a father would have buried his only son, a lonely boy would have remained invisible to the world, and one unopened letter would have stayed hidden forever. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin with a single act of kindness, and a stranger who refuses to keep walking.